Hello everyone and welcome to an amazing game from the German Bundesliga. It's a beautiful game between Valery Kazakouski from Lithuania, a Lithuanian Grandmaster, and Arjun Erigaisi. Of course, everyone knows Arjun. This is the first time we are featuring Valery on the channel. He had a pretty rough start to the league, but then he got well, basically an incredible run. He's on a 6-game unbeaten streak where he defeated Narayanan, and he drew some incredible players such as David Navara, Ivan Šarić, Shahriar Mamedyarov, Leon Livaic, and Max Varmerdam. And now he faces Arjun Erigaisi. It's a crazy game where... But it's just not, it's not the way classical is played nowadays. It's not a classical game that you would expect in a close tournament. More of an classical game that you would expect in an open tournament in the beginning, or something like that. But even for a team event, it's a really wild game. So yeah, let's check it out and see what happened in this one and why why I decided to show this one. It comes as a suggestion from Nazareno Almiron. Thank you for that. And yeah, let's check it out. Let's enjoy some chess. So Valery with white opens with pawn to e4, and Arjun says, all right, I'm interested in a fight today. Plays pawn to c5, goes for the Sicilian defense. We have knight to f3, pawn to d6, and bishop to b5 check. This is the canal attack, similar to the Nimzovich-Rossolimo. Sometimes it's called the canal, sometimes the Sokolsky attack. If black goes knight c6 instead of d6, then it's the Nimzovich-Rossolimo, and they can transpose into similar positions, but obviously there are differences. We have knight to d7, pawn to a4, and knight to f6. This is all very well known, nothing new here. Knight to c3, a6, and bishop goes back. Bishop e2 and b6. This is the most common line, and no surprises here. You can see that the players are playing fairly quickly. Valery even more so. Arjun spending some time to decide how to maybe get a playable position against his opponent. He is in good form, but of course Arjun being rated almost 2800 has to beat players rated 2560 if he wants to continue increasing his rating. So pawn to d4, we have c captures and now queen captures. If you play the canal attack and you get positions like these, you can try knight captures on d4. It's it's been played only a few times because in top level chess it doesn't really do all that much, but you could try it maybe at your level. Let's say bishop to b7 goes after d4 pawn. You can sacrifice this pawn and it can lead to some very interesting positions if black decides to capture the pawn. Then you can go something like knight captures, bishop captures, rook to e1, and black can have all sorts of problems along this e-file. If you go bishop g6, then bishop f3 is already very strong, and if bishop to b7, which is best, then you can go knight f5, and it's very difficult for black to even make a move here. Like the top engine move is bishop back to e4. But I mean, who would play that if you just continue developing normally with something like this? You can't play this because the d6 pawn hangs. But even with the g6, the d6 pawn still hangs. Like captures, then you open up a nice discovery towards the black king, and black falls apart. So it's maybe if you play the canal attack, maybe you can try this, maybe it works out for you. But queen captures on d4 is what grandmasters play. So queen captures, we have bishop to b7, putting pressure on the pawn, but it is already sufficiently defended. We have castles kingside and pawn to e5, chasing away the queen. Queen e3, keeping an eye on that e4 pawn, and bishop to e7. We have knight to d2, now adding another defender, maybe with some ideas of king h1, maybe f4. And there are a couple of top-level games that reached this position. For example, Parham Maksulu played this exact move against Wei Yi, and he defeated Wei Yi. And also, Anish Giri played it against Salim Saleh, and Anish won the game. So in top-level chess, black don't really do well with this particular setup. Seturaman has a win in the database, but yeah, more often than not, black lose these positions. But here, Arjun plays knight to c5, which is the top move recommended by the engine. So obviously he has some surprises in mind. So let's see what happens here. And of course, it is now as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. Rook to d1, the e4 pawn is sufficiently defended, and now rook to c8. And You can see that both of them are playing fairly quickly. It's an hour and 30 minutes for the first 40 moves, then an additional half an hour is granted, but you have to, of course, reach time control. And here Valery goes into a 20-minute thing, maybe some 19 minutes, and opts for knight to c4. Now, there are many moves you could play. Knight to d5 is a move, f3 is a move if you want to, never worry about the e4 pawn again. You could also play bishop to f3, which is a little bit weird, but of course it can be played. But no, knight to c4, and this is very, very interesting. It seems like the knight from c5 cannot move due to the b6 pawn being attacked. It can, but it's even better to play knight captures, knight f captures on e4. Now the question is, why would Valery give up the e4 pawn? Obviously there is a reason to this, so let's see what this reason is. Arjun captures on e4, knight f captures on e4, knight captures on e4, and bishop captures on e4. So what's the idea behind the sacrifice? The idea, as it often is pawn to b4, chasing away the defender of the bishop on e4. Now I just want to show you a tricky line instead of pawn to b4. Some of you might be wondering, is bishop to g4 a move? It certainly is, and we get a very, very complicated position. For example, f5, you can even give another check, and if g6, you can even play queen to h6, now trying to give up the bishop on h5. But here, black actually has to play pawn to f4 with some bishop to g5 tricks in mind. And now after knight captures on e5, because the d pawn is pinned, you will play bishop to g5, and after queen g7, queen to f6, and okay, we trade queens, and the game continues, but it's not really all that spectacular for white. It's a pretty forced line. Like captures, the knight can come to c4, black can castle kingside, and now whatever white plays, black will always be on top. Like bishop g4 can attack the rook. You can play bishop captures on c2, attack the white rook. Bishop captures on c8, bishop captures on d1, knight captures on b6, rook to e8, threatening mate on e1, so bishop to d2, you're going to play bishop to e2, and now many moves can be played, like bishop captures on b2, rook to b1, attacks the bishop, bishop d4, and okay, everything gets traded off. The material is equal, both players have the bishop pair, but I'm sure you can feel that black is a little bit better here with the more active bishops, with, well, the past the d pawn here. It's a pretty nice position. And also if bishop captures on e5, bishop to d3, it just becomes very, very complicated. But okay, that's a long way down the road. But it's a pretty forced line, so you could easily reach that position. But b4 is by far the best. This bishop to g4 line is only the second top move recommended by the engine. I just wanted to show it to you. So b4 attacks the knight, and now you can't really move the knight. You're going to lose the bishop, so bishop captures on c2. Arjun had to calculate all of this before capturing the pawn. So he captures another pawn, but now he will have to give up two pieces for the rook. We have b captures on c5, bishop captures on d1, and bishop captures on d1. We have rook captures on c5, and now just knight b2, remaneuvering the knight to d3. So it's always better to have a bishop and knight versus a rook most of the time. But here Arjun also has two extra pawns, and in the center of the board, if this pawn starts marching forward, also if you can create a pass pawn on the queen side, that is definite compensation. So all in all, we could say it's an equal position. Some would prefer this with white, some would prefer this with black. Probably really strong players would say, I don't really care, I can play this with both white and black. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's check what happens. We have castles kingside by Arjun, knight to d3, attacks the rook, rook back to c8, and bishop to b3. Nicely developing, but also allowing this nasty rook to c3 pin. It's not that it's a losing move or anything, this bishop to b3. Maybe it just allows Arjun a little bit too much. We have rook to b3, rook to b1, defending the bishop, and now pawn to d5. Okay, we have bishop to d2, attacking the rook. Here, queen captures on e5 seems like, why wouldn't you play this? But it's actually very complicated. If queen captures on e5, it is the best move you can play, but it's very complicated. It requires you to give up the knight here, and after rook captures on d3, you will play bishop to c2. And the rook is sort of trapped. You can give back the exchange with rook to a3 and then you capture with the bishop, but the thing is, after rook a3, white can throw in this in-between bishop to b2, threatening checkmate, and now the only way to defend this for black is to play d4, and once the bishop captures, play pawn to f6. If you don't find that, if you play a silly move like bishop to f6, which looks like should be winning for black, all of a sudden queen f5 threatens checkmate, and the only way to stop checkmate is to play g6, and well, now the bishop just hangs. You will play queen captures on f6, and this is now well, either winning or close to winning for white, because black lost the very valuable e5 pawn. So something similar happened in the game, except Arjun manages to keep his e pawn. Here bishop to d2 was played, queen captures on e5. The line we've just shown is by far the best for white. Now comes bishop to g5. Arjun just opts for a queen trade. Not opts, he actually forces it. Queen captures, we have queen captures, bishop captures, and now rook captures on d3. So similar to what we've discussed, only Arjun keeps the e5 pawn, and that is a huge difference here. Bishop to c2, attacking the rook, rook to c3, and bishop to d1. We have rook f to c8, getting the other rook into the game, and king to f1. So it's still very much playable. The bishop pair is extremely strong. If you can position it well, the bishop pair is well, more powerful than the queen. We have pawn to f6, and now bishop back to d2. We have rook 3 to c6, getting the rook back to defend the b6 pawn, and the bishop to f3, putting pressure on d5, rook to d8 defending, and now bishop back to e2, going after the a6 pawn. So Arjun plays pawn to a5, and if you consider this pawn to a5 move, okay, now you can't really play pawn to b5, and Valery no longer has to worry about Arjun pushing those queenside pawns. But now Arjun's pawns are all on dark squares. Not all, but they will be soon. Which means that if you can eliminate the dark square bishop, the light square bishop will be close to useless. So okay, pawn to f3, we have king f7. In the endgame, it is always important to activate our king as much as possible. Not too much, but as much as possible. Rook b2, we have pawn to f5. Bishop to b5, attacking the rook, and rook to c5. We have king e2 and king to e6. Both players, of course, improving the position of their king. Bishop back to d3 and rook to d6. Now, adding another defender here. Bishop back to c2 and pawn to e4. Charging forward, we have bishop to f4 and now rook d to c6. Okay, nicely doubled up on the c file, threatening the bishop on c2. We have bishop to b3 and now pawn to b5. We have bishop to e3, attacking the rook. Also, this pawn to b5 move is sort of tricky, because if you play a captures on b5, it seems like it's a great idea, but after rook captures on b5, you're just not in time to save the rook on b2. There's nothing you can do. King d2, you're just gonna challenge it, and after pawn to a4, you're gonna lose. If bishop captures with check to win the rook, of course, just rook captures on d5. I know, perhaps a silly thing to show, but some of you were thinking that. I know you were. So after b5, bishop to e3, attacking the rook, and now look at this. You could move the rook, and then a captures on b5 is, in fact, very strong for white. Pawn to b4. It's always pawn to b4. Once you get to play that and you're not losing, you're definitely winning. And the question is, should the rook be captured? Well, you could consider it definitely. If bishop captures rook on c5, rook captures on c5, you do have a light square bishop. You still have a rook, but not much to be done there. Rook d2, king to e5, and that pawn is coming to d4. The pawns are marching forward. Rook is coming to c3. Later on, perhaps the a4 pawn can be captured. Maybe white can miraculously somehow save this, but not very likely. It would be, definitely an attempt. Rook to d2 is by far the best you can try. We have rook to c4. Again, Arjun offers the exchange, and again, it is declined. So before we discussed, all of the pawns were on dark squares, and you should definitely go for the dark square bishop. But now all of the pawns are on light squares, and you would be very happy if bishop captures this rook. If bishop captures this rook, d captures. This is not a bad position. Unfortunately for Arjun, it would still be a draw, because after, let's say, a couple of pawns get traded off, you go rook to d8, c3. those pawns look very scary, but you can actually stop them quite easily. King to c1, and there's no way for you to promote any of them. If you try, you're gonna overextend and you're gonna even lose the game. There's no way to promote either of those pawns. So after rook to c4, pawn to f4 was played, grabbing more space, stopping king to e5, but now Arjun gets pawn to g6, pawn to g3, and now king to d6. Now you can see that he did put his pawns on light squares, and if bishop captures, that's not going to be all that great. Here it would actually be a disaster because rook would capture, and now if you try king to d1, you can't really cross the c file easily. Just pawn to b3 attacks the da4 pawn, and if bishop to d4, which looks like the only way to stop you know, any, maybe something like rook captures, so rook to a2, I don't know, bishop to d4 looks nice. You can even play rook captures on d4, and after rook captures, king to c5, and even though white is up a full rook, the pawns are just overwhelming. Rook to d2, king to c4, king to c1, d4 is coming, d3, e3, there's no stopping those pawns. So here king to f2 is played, but now Arjun plays rook to c3, and the question is, why is now Arjun giving up the d5 pawn? If you play rook captures on d5, it comes with check, so of course it's the first thing anyone thinks of. The problem is, after the king moves, what do you play? Your bishop is hanging, okay, you can move it back. Rook to d6 now forces a trade of rooks, and after captures, yes, it's two bishops versus a rook, but not much for you to do. Bishop d2, rook a3, b3 is coming, and now after king to e2, just b3. You don't really care. And after bishop to c3, you can even play b2 because of tactics. And if you do nothing, then the bishop hangs. If you move the bishop, then the pawn is promoted. And if bishop captures, then just rook a2 skewers the bishop, and that's it. So after rook c3, bishop captures on d5 is played, which is a little bit better, but not if Arjun plays the only winning move in the position, which I'm sure now you guys have no problem finding. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Arjun while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this miraculous idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to d3. That is the win. Now, a rook trade has to happen, but it also cannot happen. In the game, bishop captures on c6 was played, but I just want to show you, if rook captures on d3, of course, you do not play e captures and then allow bishop captures on c6. First, you're going to give a check, and it doesn't matter even if the rook defends, you can just trade captures, king captures, and now the bishop is completely helpless, as all of these pawns are on light squares, and you cannot stop the black king from using the light squares to pick up the a4 pawn. It's as if this bishop does not exist. So that is pretty much that. So after rook d3, bishop captures on c6 is played, which is a little bit better, but not by a lot. Rook captures, bishop captures, and king captures on c6. I say it's a little bit better because the white king will sort of be in time to prevent the black king from utilizing the light squares completely to his advantage. But not really. So king e2, we have king to d5. Now you don't have d3. It'd be great if you did, but you don't. King to d1, king to d4, and king to c2, stopping any further advancement from the black king. But you know, it's you have b3 and you have e3, and because you have both of those, you will be able to outmaneuver the white king. So pawn to e3, bishop to c1, pawn to h5, and now bishop to b2 with check. We have king to c4, bishop to e5, and now, like I said, you have to gain control over one of these squares to win the game, and you do it by playing pawn to e2. You chase away the white king, and then you will capture the pawn on a4, and you will have two connected pass pawns marching forward. So king to d2, king to b3, we have bishop to f6. Not really sure what the idea of the move is, but you know, you have to play something. It was played, you know, with 1 second on the clock. As you can see, 30 seconds increment is in the game. King captures on a4, we have king captures on e2, and now king to a3. The pawns are now marching forward. King to a2, king to d2 first, king to a2, king to c1, and now pawn to a4, and he was in this position on move 57 that Valery Kazakouski resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The pawns will start marching forward, and there is nothing you can do. You cannot do anything on the king side. Those pawns are on light squares. Also, it's 3 versus 3, so the pawns really can't help out. And whatever you try, it doesn't really matter. Just pawn to b3, king c1, a3. You cannot stop a b2. Whatever you play, it's just going to be b2 check, and that's it. Either you allow queening, or you capture for whatever reason, and then the queen comes into the game, and then you checkmate the white king easily. So yeah, really a crazy game, beautiful, display of the canal attack, the Canal-Sokolsky, and how to play against it. It was a really, really wild line. And like I said, players with the black pieces haven't really had all that much success with it until this move was played here by Arjun. So knight to c5, top move by the engine. People before Arjun tried castles kingside, tried queen to c7, but this knight to c5 move obviously packed more poison than you'd think. And usually you never want to play knight to c5 while white still has the option of playing b4. Usually there will be a pawn on a5, and then if you can cement the knight on c5 with white not having the d pawn, b4 not being an option, knight c5 is brilliant. But here it's brilliant because it allows pawn to b4, which is the strongest move always, and in this position as well. But it just allows for such a beautiful game where you can activate. And yeah, I mean, if you want to play, you can just play anything. You can just play the top line. Yes, Arjun is much, much higher rated, but, playing with the black pieces, you cannot just play the top line that literally everyone can draw. You have to try something offbeat here, and I mean this was a beautiful display of what a strong player can do when playing such a rich opening. So thank you for such a nice suggestion, and really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Christopher Medema, Elias Wilhelm, Peter Van Doos, Derek King, and Charles Benjamin Flynn for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your game. And I played a game in the Croatian Chess League. I won a very nice game with the Evans Gambit. If you guys want to see that, I could also show that. So yeah, see you soon.